The untold story of love between humans and aliens. Get ready to be surprised. Welcome to Intergalactic Hearts, a place where the stars themselves seem to pause and listen. This channel is not just about stories, it's about the beating hearts that connect us all, no matter the galaxy, no matter the species. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to love someone from a different world, a different universe? Well, here, you're in for a journey that takes you to the furthest reaches of space, where emotions are as vast and boundless as the cosmos themselves. Today, we'll dive deep into a story that's far more than just adventure. It's about discovery, connection, and the raw emotions that come from bridging the unimaginable. With every twist and turn, you'll witness the beauty of finding love against the odds. Trust me, you don't want to miss a single moment of this. So settle in, and let's explore this new world together. And hey, if you're ready to have your heart open to new possibilities, don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts as we venture through the galaxies of Intergalactic Hearts. The twin moons of Zelura Prime hung low in the sky, casting an eerie, glowing light over the vast, crystalline city below. Far beneath, nestled among towers that shimmered like liquid glass, a bustling population of Zelurians went about their business, unaware that a single, unsuspecting human was about to set foot on their soil, a human who would unknowingly change the course of their world. Lila Montgomery's heart pounded as the transport shuttle made its descent. She stared out the viewport, her fingers absently tracing the glowing patterns along the glass. The foreign language of Zelura Prime swirled in her ears, unintelligible and haunting. She could feel the strange, unfamiliar weight of the planet's atmosphere pressing against her, the cool alien wind slipping through the shuttle's cracks, teasing her senses. Her mission was simple, to explore and document the planet's culture, but what lay ahead felt far from simple. Lila was part of a diplomatic envoy from Earth, sent to establish peaceful relations with the Zelurian Empire. She had never dreamed she would be the first human to step foot on their soil, and now that it was happening, a part of her wished she had stayed home. But Earth had longed for peace, and Zelura Prime was the key to securing that peace. She had to do this. She was the emissary, the bridge, the one who could foster unity between these two species. Or so she hoped. Prepare for landing, the voice of the pilot crackled over the intercom, snapping Lila out of her thoughts. The shuttle began its final descent toward the royal landing pad, its landing gears extending with a soft hiss. As the ship touched down, the ramp descended, and she stepped out onto the surface of a world so different from Earth that it felt as though she was standing in the middle of a dream. The air was thick with the scent of foreign flowers, their blossoms glowing in the twilight. The ground beneath her feet felt soft but firm, almost alive with energy. Tall, sleek figures moved swiftly across the landing zone, their skin shimmering in a way that reminded Lila of the stars. They were Zelurians, tall, graceful, their features both beautiful and unnerving. Their skin shifted colors like a prism, constantly changing with their emotions. Lila's eyes met one of theirs, golden eyes, full of intelligence and something else she couldn't quite place. It was a gaze that weighed her, assessed her in a way that felt both intimate and foreign. "You are Lila Montgomery, correct?" The voice came from behind her, smooth and authoritative. Turning, Lila saw the figure who had spoken, a tall Zelurian male, his skin a rich, deep violet. His hair, if one could call it that, was a cascade of luminescent fibers that seemed to glow with an inner light. His eyes, those piercing, sapphire eyes, held her captive for a moment before she could respond. "Yes, I'm Lila. It's an honor to meet you," she said, trying to mask the unease that suddenly gripped her. She reached out a hand, offering a customary human greeting. But as she did, she felt the subtle shift in the air around her, a hum, a pulse that seemed to radiate from his very presence. The Zelarian hesitated, his eyes flickering with something she couldn't quite interpret. "I am Therax," he said, his voice low and melodic. "And I must escort you to our royal chamber. The Queen is expecting you." Lila nodded, though her mind was racing. The Queen. She had read about Queen Zara, the Zelarian monarch, immortal, wise, and revered. Yet even with all her research, she couldn't prepare herself for the reality of meeting someone so alien. Therax led her through the palace gates, their towering structures rising high above them. The walls of the palace seemed to hum with energy, as if the very fabric of the building was alive. The corridors were lit by a soft, ambient glow that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once, the walls pulsing gently in response to each step. The temperature was perfect, neither too warm nor too cold, as though the palace was tailored specifically to Therax's kind. "This is our home," Therax explained as they walked, his voice a soft rumble. "Zelara Prime has been our home for millennia, and yet we remain incomplete. There is always something missing, something we cannot name." Lila nodded politely, unsure of how to respond. She had heard tales of Zelarians, but nothing could truly prepare her for the strange beauty of their world. Every corner of the palace seemed to be a work of art, every piece of furniture an intricate piece of craftsmanship that could have belonged in a museum. Yet despite the beauty surrounding her, there was an unmistakable air of something unsaid, something in the way Therax held himself, something in the way the walls seemed to pulse with a faint, almost melancholic energy. Finally, they reached the royal chamber. The door opened with a soft whisper, revealing a room that was as grand as it was serene. The room itself was a perfect fusion of nature and technology, the floor a smooth, dark stone that gleamed with a soft glow. The walls were alive with bioluminescent flora, their petals slowly opening and closing like the breaths of the room itself. And in the center of it all was the Queen. Queen Zara was unlike anything Lila had ever seen. She was beautiful, but in a way that felt almost otherworldly. Her skin shimmered in iridescent hues, shifting with each breath she took. Her eyes, though human in shape, were entirely unlike any humans, a deep, glowing shade of purple, full of ancient wisdom. Lila felt small in her presence, even as she stood tall. "You are the human emissary," the Queen's voice was a melodic blend of both warmth and power, and yet there was a layer of something else beneath it, something unsettling. Lila nodded, trying to steady herself. "Yes, Your Majesty. It is an honor to meet you." The Queen regarded her silently for a moment, her glowing eyes never leaving Lila's face. The silence stretched on, and Lila began to feel the weight of the moment pressing on her. "Do you understand what you've come to do here, human?" Queen Zara asked, her voice as smooth and calm as still water. "Do you understand the stakes of your mission?" The responsibility that lies upon you. Lila hesitated before answering, her throat dry. I understand, Your Majesty. I will do everything I can to ensure peace between our peoples. The Queen's gaze softened, but only for a moment. And what will you do if peace cannot be achieved? She asked, her voice dropping to a whisper that sent a shiver down Lila's spine. What if peace means something more? Something far deeper, far more intimate than you can imagine. Lila's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what the Queen was referring to, but the way she said it, the way the very air around them seemed to thrum with tension, told her that nothing was as it seemed here on Zelara Prime. She had walked into a mystery far deeper than she could have anticipated. For the first time, Lila realized that this was no ordinary diplomatic mission. It was far more than just establishing peace. It was the beginning of something neither she nor the Zelarians could yet fully comprehend. And as she stood there, face to face with Queen Zara, Lila had the distinct sense that her life was about to change forever. The grand chamber felt suffocating as the silence between Lila and Queen Zara lingered. Her words echoed in Lila's mind like a deep hum, one that seemed to vibrate the very walls of the palace. What if peace means something more? Something deeper? The question seemed to hang in the air, unresolved, as though the Queen knew something Lila didn't. Lila swallowed hard, trying to steady the racing of her heart. She had trained for this moment her entire life, studying the intricacies of alien cultures, learning the delicate art of diplomacy, and memorizing the expected protocols of interstellar negotiations. But this felt different. There was an undercurrent to the atmosphere here, something unspoken but ever present. The Queen's eyes, glowing with a soft, purple hue, studied her closely, as though she were reading Lila's very thoughts. You are not the first human to come to our world, Lila Montgomery. But you are the first to be entrusted with what lies ahead. And that, human, the Queen's voice dropped to a low whisper, is a responsibility that no one has ever dared shoulder before. Lila shifted uncomfortably under the weight of the Queen's gaze. It was clear that the stakes were far higher than she had originally thought. The mission was no longer just about peace treaties, meetings, and trade agreements. It was about something much more profound. But what could that be? The tension in the room made her question everything she had learned. I will do my best, Your Majesty, Lila said, trying to keep her voice steady. I came here with the full intention of ensuring peace, of being the bridge between our two species. The Queen nodded, but there was something almost knowing in her expression. A bridge, she mused softly, between two worlds. Between two peoples who cannot yet understand each other. Her words seemed to ripple through the air, heavy with meaning. But can a bridge truly connect the divided, Lila Montgomery? Or is it only a reminder of the gap that will never be crossed? The room felt colder then, the lights dimming slightly as if the very space around them was holding its breath. Lila felt a strange sensation rise in her chest. It wasn't fear, but something more primal: curiosity, confusion, and the undeniable pull of something else, something she couldn't quite name. We have much to discuss, Queen Zara continued, her voice cutting through the silence. But first, you must understand one thing: your people and mine have been locked in a cycle of mistrust for centuries. The history between us is long and filled with scars that cannot simply be healed with treaties and words. Lila nodded, understanding the weight of the Queen's statement. Earth and the Zelarian Empire had been at odds for decades. Disputes over resources, misunderstandings of cultures, and a long history of territorial battles had created a chasm between their civilizations. The peace process was fragile, and any wrong move could undo everything. Yet, the Queen's tone was not accusatory, it was more like a challenge. A challenge to see beyond the surface, to look deeper into what truly divided their people, and to confront the uncomfortable truth that peace might not be what it seemed. But what did she mean by that? What was this something more that the Queen spoke of? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts, and the doors to the chamber opened to reveal Therax, who had remained silent throughout their conversation. His eyes flickered with recognition as he stepped forward, bowing respectfully to the Queen. "Your Majesty," he said in a voice that was both measured and calm, "the preparations for the ceremony are ready." Lila felt a strange shiver run down her spine at the word ceremony. What ceremony? She glanced quickly at Queen Zara, who was watching her with an intensity that only deepened her unease. "You must come with me," the Queen said, rising from her throne in one fluid motion. "There are matters that must be addressed before we continue our discussions." Lila hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. Whatever the Queen wanted to show her, whatever path this mission was leading her down, she had no choice but to follow. She had to understand, to learn, to be the emissary that Earth had sent her to be. The palace corridors felt even more surreal as they moved deeper inside. The walls seemed to pulse with life, the bioluminescent flora illuminating their path in shifting hues of blue and purple. The air was thick with the scent of strange flowers that bloomed along the walls, their petals glowing as if reacting to their presence. It felt as though they were walking through a dream, a world that was both alien and strangely familiar. Therax led them down a narrow, winding corridor until they reached a heavy, ornate door that seemed to hum with energy. Queen Zara gestured for Lila to enter first, and she did so, her heart pounding in her chest. Inside was a large, circular room, its walls adorned with intricate carvings of Zelarian history, glowing softly in the dim light. In the center of the room stood a large stone platform, its surface covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change the longer Lila looked at them. "You will learn our ways, human," Queen Zara said, her voice suddenly soft and full of mystery. "But first, you must witness what binds us. What keeps us alive, in the truest sense of the word." Lila's curiosity piqued as she stepped closer to the platform, her eyes scanning the symbols etched into the stone. There was something ancient about this place, something that felt older than the Zelarian Empire itself. Before Lila could ask, Queen Zara placed her hand gently on the stone. The air in the room shifted, becoming thick with energy. The patterns on the platform began to glow brighter, and the stone seemed to come alive. Lila stepped back, a sense of wonder mixed with fear flooding her chest. What was happening? Therax, standing by the door, didn't move. "It is the Viharil," he explained, his voice a mere whisper. "A sacred Zelarian ritual. It is not something outsiders ever witness." Lila's breath caught in her throat as the room seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly light. She couldn't tear her gaze away from the glowing stone, nor from the queen, whose features were now illuminated with an ethereal radiance. The Viharil is a bond, human, Queen Zara said, her voice reverberating with power. A bond between us and our planet. Between us and the energy that courses through our veins. It is a connection that is older than our people, and it is what has allowed our species to survive through countless trials and tribulations. Lila stood frozen, her heart hammering in her chest. The air seemed thick with magic or whatever it was that made this moment feel like the very fabric of reality was being bent before her. Was this part of the something more the Queen had mentioned? A bond between the Zelarians and their planet that went beyond physical existence. You will understand soon enough, Queen Zara whispered, her eyes meeting Lila's with a deep intensity. But first, you must make a choice. Lila's pulse quickened as she stepped forward. She had no idea what kind of choice the Queen was asking her to make, but she knew deep down that it was one that would change everything. The Queen's gaze softened. "Do you trust me, Lila Montgomery?" she asked, her voice laced with both power and vulnerability. Lila had come here to foster peace, to negotiate, to bring two worlds together. But now, she faced something more. A choice that went beyond diplomacy, beyond politics. It was a choice that would force her to confront not just the differences between their species, but something far deeper. Something she wasn't ready to understand. But standing here, under the weight of Queen Zara's gaze, Lila knew one thing: her life, and the future of both humanity and the Zelarians, would never be the same again. "Yes," Lila whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. "I trust you." And with that, she took her first step toward a future she never could have imagined, a future where love, power, and ancient bonds would shape everything she knew. Lila stood on the precipice of a choice that could reshape not only her life but the fate of two civilizations. The air around her hummed with an energy that was both exhilarating and terrifying. She looked at Queen Zara, her glowing violet eyes locking with Lila's. The weight of her decision pressed against her chest, yet the trust she had just offered felt oddly right, as though some unseen force had guided her to this moment. "Do you understand now, human?" Queen Zara's voice was soft yet carrying an undercurrent of something ancient, something powerful. "The Viharil is not just a bond between us and our planet. It is a bond that connects us to the very fabric of life itself. And now, it is yours to embrace if you choose." Lila's mind swirled with the implications of the Queen's words. This was beyond anything she had ever imagined. A connection to the energy of the planet. What did that even mean? And why had Queen Zara offered this to her? The Queen's hand lingered on the stone platform, the intricate patterns now glowing with an intensity that made the air thick with sensation. Lila stepped closer, feeling the warmth radiating from the stone. The symbol seemed to pulse with life, and for a moment, she thought she saw the images of Zelarian ancestors etched within the glowing lines, their faces full of hope and wisdom. They were reaching out to her, as if urging her to understand something she could not yet grasp. I don't understand," Lila said, her voice trembling with the weight of her uncertainty. "What does this connection mean for me? How does it work? What do I have to do?" Queen Zara smiled, a subtle curve of her lips that held no malice, only a deep, enigmatic understanding. You must allow yourself to feel it, she said softly. The connection is not about words or actions. It is about surrendering your mind and your spirit to the very energy that has kept my people alive for eons. Only then can you begin to understand the depths of the bond. Lila hesitated. She had always prided herself on her logic, her understanding of diplomacy, her ability to process information with cold precision. But this was something else entirely. It required vulnerability. It required trust in something that transcended rational thought. You will not be alone in this, Queen Zara continued, sensing Lila's hesitation. Virax and the others will be here, but you must decide if you are ready. If you can embrace the unknown. Lila's gaze shifted to Virax, who had remained silent, watching with a mixture of respect and expectation. He had been with her since the moment she arrived, guiding her through the complexities of Zelarian society. But now, it seemed as though the true test lay in her hands. Taking a deep breath, Lila stepped forward, her body trembling slightly as she placed her hand on the stone platform. A jolt of energy shot through her fingertips, and she gasped, feeling as though her entire being was being pulled into the very heart of the planet. The symbols on the stone seemed to come alive, swirling and shifting, taking on an otherworldly quality. The room around her began to blur, the edges of reality warping as if she were being transported into another dimension. Lila's heart pounded in her chest as visions began to flood her mind. She saw the Zelarian people tall, elegant, and graceful, their luminous skin glowing in the light of their twin suns. She felt their struggles, their triumphs, and the deep connection they shared with their world. She saw their ancient temples, their cities of crystal and light, and she could almost hear the whispers of the wind through their majestic, bio-organic forests. But then, as quickly as the vision came, it faded, and Lila found herself back in the chamber. Her hand still rested on the stone, but her breath was heavy, and her heart was racing. She looked up at Queen Zara, whose expression had shifted to one of calm understanding. "It is a bond, Lila," the Queen said softly. "You have now touched the energy that flows through our veins, through our very existence. This is the heart of Zelaria, and it is now a part of you." Lila's mind spun as she tried to make sense of the overwhelming experience. She had felt it, the energy, the connection, the life force that powered everything on this planet. It was more than just science or technology. It was something ancient, something primal, and now, it was a part of her. I felt it," Lila whispered, her voice shaky. "But how do I carry this responsibility? How do I share this with others?" Queen Zara stepped closer, her violet eyes glowing with an intensity that made Lila feel as though she were staring into the very soul of the Queen. "You will not have to share it, Lila," she said. "Not yet, anyway. The energy is a part of you now, but it will take time for you to understand its true depth. For now, all you need to know is that you are not just a representative of your people anymore. You are something more." Lila's heart skipped a beat as the weight of the Queen's words sank in. She had come here to negotiate peace. To be the bridge between Earth and the Zelarians. But now, she was something more, a part of this world, connected in a way she never could have imagined. Virax stepped forward, his voice breaking the silence. "What happens now, Your Majesty?" he asked, his gaze shifting from Lila to Queen Zara. The Queen's gaze softened. "Now, we wait," she said, her voice carrying a note of finality. Lila must learn to harness the connection. She must discover what this bond means not just for her, but for all of us. Lila took a step back, her hand still resting on the stone, as though it were a lifeline to something greater than herself. The weight of the Queen's words pressed down on her, but beneath the uncertainty, she felt a spark of something else, something she couldn't yet name. She was no longer just an emissary. She was part of something far larger than any peace treaty or diplomatic mission. She was part of a bond that transcended worlds. But with this connection came a responsibility that would test her very soul. Is this what I was meant for? Lila thought, her mind racing with the enormity of the task ahead. To be the bridge between two worlds, to carry the fate of two species on my shoulders. She didn't know the answer yet. But she knew one thing: she couldn't turn back now. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges that no one could predict. But as she stood there, hands trembling against the stone, she felt a sense of purpose settle in her heart. She had made her choice. And no matter what came next, she would face it with everything she had. And so, the journey had only just begun. Lila woke to the soft hum of the chamber, the echo of her dreams still lingering in her mind. The energy she had touched the day before was not just a fleeting sensation, it had embedded itself in her, woven into the very fabric of her being. It was as though the pulse of the Zelarian planet itself was now beating in sync with her heart, guiding her in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. She sat up, the quiet whispers of the wind outside the chamber filling the silence. The soft rustle of the trees, the crackling of energy in the air, it all felt so alive. A sensation unlike anything she had ever experienced on Earth. Here, in this strange new world, she was not just a human, she was part of something that had existed long before her species ever dreamed of space travel. Stepping carefully out of bed, Lila moved toward the small window of her quarters. Outside, the crystal forest stretched into the distance, its bioluminescent plants casting soft, iridescent glows against the darkening sky. The beauty of it was breathtaking, but it was also a stark reminder of how little she knew of this world. How much more there was to learn. Her gaze shifted to the horizon, where the towering spires of Zelaria's capital rose into the clouds, their bioorganic architecture blending seamlessly with the natural world. This planet was alive in ways that Earth could never be. It was in the very air they breathed, the ground they walked on. "You're thinking too much," a soft voice interrupted her thoughts. Lila turned to see Therax standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable, but his presence calming. He had been with her since her arrival, always a steady presence amid the chaos of her mission. But today, there was something different about him, a hint of tension in his normally calm demeanor. "I can't help it," Lila admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. It's too much to take in." Therax stepped closer, his eyes softening with understanding. "I've seen the way the Viharil connects to you. You feel it, don't you?" Lila nodded, her mind swirling with the complexity of the bond she had just begun to understand. "It's like, everything here is alive in a way that I can't even explain. It's overwhelming. But also, beautiful. Therax's lips quirked into a faint smile. For us, it's normal. But for you, it's new. And you're not just here to witness it, Lila. You're part of it now. The weight of his words settled in her chest like a stone. She wasn't just a visitor in this world. She wasn't merely an emissary. She was becoming part of the very energy that powered this civilization. She had no idea how that would play out or what it meant, but it was hers now. Forever. Do you think I'm ready for this? Lila asked, turning to face him fully, searching for some kind of reassurance in his gaze. You don't have to be ready, Lila, Therax replied, his voice gentle. You just have to trust that you'll figure it out. The path ahead is not one anyone can predict, least of all me. But you are not alone. We'll face it together. His words settled into her, offering some comfort, but also more questions. What path was he talking about? What did the future hold for her now that she was so deeply intertwined with Zelaria and its people? I know one thing for sure, Lila said softly. I can't go back. I don't know how I got here, but this place, this bond, it's more than anything I've ever known. Therax's eyes softened, and he placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch warm and reassuring. We will figure this out together, Lila. And we will make sure the truth of what happened here isn't lost. The council chamber was filled with the low hum of discussion, the soft glow of bioluminescence casting an ethereal light over the gathering. Lila sat at the edge of the room, her hands clasped together in her lap as she watched Queen Zera prepare to address the gathering. This was no ordinary council meeting. Today's discussion was a critical one that could shape the future of the alliance between Earth and Zelaria, a future that seemed more uncertain than ever. As Queen Zera stepped forward, her regal presence commanding attention, the room fell silent. The Zelarians, their glowing veins flickering with emotions they had yet to fully understand, focused their attention on their leader. Lila could feel the weight of the moment pressing on her, the significance of this meeting heavy in the air. Lila, I want you to listen, Queen Zera's voice echoed in the room. Today, we face a decision that could either strengthen our bond or drive us further apart. Lila nodded, trying to steady her nerves. It had been a long time since she had felt so out of place. But she was determined to be part of something that was so much bigger than any war or alliance. She was here to help bridge the gap between two worlds, even if it meant walking through the unknown. The Viharil bond is not something to be taken lightly, Queen Zera continued. It binds us not only to each other, but to the planet itself. And now, it seems that we have a human among us who shares this connection. A human who understands the essence of Zelaria more than any of us could have expected. Lila felt the weight of all eyes turning toward her, their piercing gazes filled with curiosity, suspicion, and a deep-seated need to understand what this bond meant for their future. I know this bond is not what you expected, Queen Zera said, her gaze softening toward Lila. But you, Lila, are proof that our connection with the world and with each other is not defined by bloodlines or species. It is defined by something deeper, something that transcends our differences. The room erupted into a flurry of whispers, the Zelarians debating in low tones, unsure of what to make of the Queen's words. Lila could sense the tension in the room, the push and pull between tradition and change. She was not just an outsider anymore. She was the catalyst for something entirely new. Queen Zara held up a hand, silencing the room once more. "There is no going back," she said, her voice carrying an authority that stilled the air. "Lila has shared the Viharil with us, and through her, we will understand each other in ways we never could before. This is the future of our people. And the future of your people as well." Lila stood, the weight of the moment pulling her forward. "I don't have all the answers," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "But I know that we can't move forward by holding onto the past. We have to find a new way. Together." The room was silent as the implications of her words sank in. Lila wasn't just here to mediate peace, she was here to change the very way Zelaria and Earth saw each other. And, with the Viharil bond between them, she was ready to be the bridge. As the council meeting came to an end, Lila stepped outside, her mind still spinning with the weight of the decisions that had been made. The air felt different now, charged with potential, but also with the unknown. She could feel the energy of Zelaria flowing through her, a reminder that she was no longer a mere observer in this world. She was part of it. Dirax met her outside, his gaze softening when he saw her expression. "How did it go?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Lila took a deep breath, trying to calm the racing thoughts in her head. "It's going to be harder than I thought," she admitted. "But we have no choice now. The future is in our hands." Dirax nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly. "We will make it work. Together. Together." The word echoed in Lila's mind as she looked out over the horizon. It was more than just a promise. It was the only way forward. Lila stood at the edge of the terrace, the wind brushing her face, carrying the scent of alien flowers that bloomed in the rich soil of Zelaria. The landscape stretched before her, vibrant and alive, a world so different from Earth, yet here she was, trying to bridge the gap between two species, two worlds that had never imagined coexistence. The weight of what had just transpired in the council hall pressed heavily on her shoulders, but deep inside, she felt a flicker of hope. Her hand rested on the cold railing, her fingers tracing the intricate patterns of light that ran through the crystalline surface. The city of Zelaria sprawled beneath her, its towers reaching skyward, glowing with an ethereal light. But the beauty of it only seemed to amplify the task ahead of her. The humans and the Zelarians, both races, proud and different, would need more than just dialogue to understand each other. "Everything seems to be in motion now," Lila whispered to herself. "But are we really ready for what's to come?" Behind her, a soft sound interrupted her thoughts. It was Dirax, his movements quiet as always, like a shadow against the backdrop of the vibrant world. She didn't need to turn to know who it was, his presence had become a steady reassurance in the chaos that was her new life. "You're reflecting on the council's decision," Dirax said, stepping closer, his voice calm. "You are not alone in this, Lila. We all are trying to adjust to what you've brought." She turned to face him, meeting his gaze. His violet eyes were unwavering, but there was a flicker of concern there that she hadn't noticed before. "I know," she replied softly. "But I don't think they understand." How difficult this is going to be. Not just for me but for both of us. You underestimate yourself, Therax replied. They already see you as more than just a human. You represent something new, Lila. Your presence here is already altering the course of things. They can feel it. It's the energy, the Viharil, that binds you to them now. Lila felt a stirring in her chest at his words. The Viharil, this bond between them, was something that neither she nor the Zelarians fully understood. It was more than just the physical touch, it was the connection of their souls. The pulse of life that linked them. She had felt it when they had first shared it, and it was growing stronger, pulling her deeper into the fabric of this world. I don't know if I can handle this, she admitted. There's so much, so many things I still don't understand. Therax stepped closer, his hand resting on her shoulder. And you will learn, Lila. You are not meant to do this alone. You are the key to something greater than either of us. She shook her head slightly, the weight of his words both comforting and frightening. I just don't want to make a mistake. We're talking about the future of two entire worlds, Therax. How can one person, one human, change everything? Therax's expression softened, and he took a deep breath. You have already done more than anyone ever expected. And together, we will make sure that the path you're on isn't one of destruction, but of understanding. But first, you must understand something important. This bond we share, this Viharil, is the beginning. It is the foundation of everything. Lila swallowed, the magnitude of his words sinking in. The Viharil was not just some mystical force, it was the force that could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. She wasn't just some ambassador. She was a living bridge, a connection between two species that had been at war for so long. The next day, Lila found herself standing in the heart of Zelaria's capital. The vast marketplace sprawled before her, filled with vibrant stalls selling strange, otherworldly goods. Alien spices, glowing gemstones, and textiles woven from materials she couldn't even begin to name, all of it stood in stark contrast to the concrete and steel of Earth's cities. But there was one thing that remained constant: the people. Zelarians bustled around her, their glowing veins pulsing with energy. They were so different from humans, tall, their bodies elegantly shaped, with skin that shimmered like the very stars. Their movements were fluid, controlled, and there was a sense of purpose in everything they did. And yet, beneath the polished exterior, Lila could see the same emotions in their eyes: fear, hope, uncertainty. And then there was the issue that lay deep beneath all of this, an issue no one was willing to speak of yet: the growing unrest within the Zelarian Empire. The faction that had opposed the Queen's decision to open up relations with Earth was growing louder, more powerful. The path ahead was filled with danger, both from within Zelaria and from Earth, where hardliners were equally resistant to change. Are you ready? Therax asked, his voice pulling her back to the present. Lila looked up at him, offering a faint smile. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. But we have to try. He nodded, his gaze softening. Then let's go. The next step is crucial. They walked through the marketplace, their footsteps in sync, moving with purpose. Therax led her to a quiet side street where a cloaked figure waited in the shadows. This was one of the contacts who had expressed interest in their cause. but even Lila could feel the tension in the air as they approached. The figure stepped forward as they neared, revealing a woman with silver hair and eyes that glowed an eerie green, a representative of the House of Balur, one of the lesser houses that had long opposed the ruling faction. The woman's gaze was sharp, assessing, yet there was a hint of curiosity in her expression. "You are the human who has bonded with Zelaria," the woman said, her voice smooth and steady. Lila nodded, trying to mask the nervousness that rose within her. "Yes, and I believe that this bond, this connection, can change everything." The woman eyed her with suspicion, but there was something else there too, something that Lila recognized. It was the same curiosity that had filled her own heart when she first felt the Viharil. The yearning to understand, to connect. "I've heard the rumors," the woman continued, "that you've shared the Viharil with the Queen. That you understand what others do not." Lila took a deep breath, steadying herself. "It's true. And that's why I'm here. We need allies, people who are willing to see things differently. The future of Zelaria and Earth doesn't have to be a future of war. It can be a future of unity." The woman was silent for a long moment, her glowing eyes studying Lila. Finally, she spoke again. "If what you say is true, then you may just be the catalyst we need. But know this, human, the House of Balur is not without its enemies. If you truly want our help, you must be prepared for the cost." Lila's heart raced. "I'm ready," she said, though she wasn't sure she believed her own words. The days that followed were a whirlwind of secret meetings, cryptic messages, and carefully planned moves. Lila and Therax moved in the shadows, never staying in one place too long, always keeping one step ahead of those who would seek to stop them. With each passing day, Lila's understanding of the complexities of Zelarian politics deepened. She was not just a player in a game anymore, she was the game's heart. But as the tension grew, so too did the danger. The factions within Zelaria were not the only ones who posed a threat. Earth's military command, though reluctant, had begun to take notice of her actions. If she wasn't careful, the very thing she was trying to build could unravel before it even began. Therax's presence was a constant, his stoic demeanor offering Lila both protection and strength. In him, she saw a leader, someone who understood the delicate balance of power in a way that she could only begin to fathom. Together, they would have to face the forces that sought to tear everything apart. But even as the stakes grew higher, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that she had already crossed a threshold. There was no going back now. Whether she succeeded or failed, the Viharil bond would live on, and the future of both species had already changed forever. The days passed in a haze of whispered conversations and cautious movements, with Lila and Therax never staying in one place too long. Every step they took seemed to weigh heavier than the last, as the burden of their mission grew with each passing hour. Lila could feel the eyes of both allies and enemies upon them, lurking just beyond the corner, watching their every move. Yet, despite the tension, there was something exhilarating about this uncertainty, an undercurrent of possibility that hummed through the air like static, reminding her that change was coming. Today was different. Today, they would meet with one of the most influential figures in the House of Balur, a powerful, enigmatic leader who could either be their greatest ally or their most dangerous adversary. They had no choice but to walk this fragile line between diplomacy and danger. Lila stood at the edge of the stone balcony, gazing out over the bustling city of Zelaria. The distant skyline was shrouded in mist, a faint light casting long shadows on the towering spires. The city was alive with energy, a stark contrast to the quiet hum of secrecy that had defined the past few days. "You seem distracted," Therax's voice cut through the quiet, his presence almost imperceptible as he stood next to her. "Something is on your mind." Lila didn't immediately answer. She was lost in the vastness of the city, in the future she was trying to shape one moment at a time. But deep down, the question that gnawed at her wasn't about the political situation, or even about the dangers that surrounded them. It was something more personal, the growing connection between her and Therax. In the beginning, their bond had been one of necessity, an alliance formed out of mutual benefit and survival. But now, with every shared moment, every conversation, every glance, she felt something more. It wasn't just the Viharil, it was a connection that transcended the physical. A bond forged in the fires of conflict, but now pulsing with something more, a shared understanding that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. Lila turned to him, her golden eyes meeting his. "I've been thinking about the future," she said softly. "Not just ours but the future of Zelaria and Earth. I can't help but feel like we're walking a razor's edge." Therax's violet eyes softened, his expression unreadable, but there was a flicker of something, empathy, perhaps. "We are. But you knew that when you stepped into this role. You knew the risks, Lila." "I did," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "But it's different when you're actually in the middle of it all. The weight of this, it's like nothing I've ever felt before. Sometimes, I wonder if I can really change anything, or if I'm just another pawn in a game I don't fully understand." Therax stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "You're not a pawn. You're the key. Don't forget that." Her breath caught at his words. They weren't just meant to reassure her, they were a reminder of what they had both become, together. He was right. She wasn't a pawn. She was the one who held the power to shift the course of history. As the two of them shared that moment of quiet understanding, a soft chime echoed through the room, snapping them both out of their reverie. The time had come. The House of Belur's estate was a grand affair, its sprawling grounds lined with rare plants that seemed to pulse with energy. The estate was a symbol of the old guard's power, a place of wealth, prestige, and political maneuvering. But as Lila and Therax entered the opulent hall, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into the lion's den. Inside, the air was thick with tension, and the nobility of Zelaria watched them with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Their eyes glowed softly in the dim light, assessing every move, every word. Lila could feel the weight of their gazes, like invisible fingers trailing over her skin. The figure at the head of the room was none other than Lady Vastra, the leader of the House of Belur. She was tall and regal, her luminous skin glistening under the ambient lighting, but there was an air of cold calculation about her that sent a shiver down Lila's spine. Lady Vastra had long been a vocal critic of the Queen's alliance with Earth, and her support could mean the difference between success and failure. Lady Vastra studied Lila and Therax with piercing eyes, her expression unreadable. "So," she said, her voice smooth as silk, You've come to us, hoping for support. But what exactly do you offer in return, human? Lila's heart pounded in her chest, but she remained calm. This was the moment she had prepared for. I offer understanding, she began, her voice steady. I offer a chance to see beyond the borders that separate us both as individuals and as species. The Viharil has shown me that there is more to our worlds than conflict. There is potential for cooperation, for unity. And that's what I'm here to achieve. Lady Vastra raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a sly smile. Unity, you say? That's a noble vision, but we are not so easily swayed by dreams, human. The Zelarian people have fought for their place in the galaxy for centuries. And you think your little bond will change all of that? Lila felt the weight of the question, but she didn't flinch. I don't think it's a little bond, she said, her voice growing firmer. It's a bond that could change everything. The very nature of conflict, of fear, of misunderstanding, can be altered if we choose to see each other as more than enemies. A long silence followed, the only sound the soft hum of the energy crystals embedded in the walls. Lady Vastra's gaze remained fixed on Lila, calculating. Perhaps, she said slowly. But it's not just enough to talk about peace. Peace requires action. Real action. And what action are you willing to take? Lila's mind raced, the weight of her answer pressing heavily on her. This wasn't just a matter of diplomacy anymore, it was about survival. The survival of both species, and the future they could build together. We're ready to act, Lila said, her voice full of conviction. Not just with words, but with deeds. We're ready to show the people of Zelaria and Earth that we can coexist. We will find a way to share resources, to grow together, to protect our futures. The room fell silent again, the tension palpable. Therax, who had remained by Lila's side, finally spoke. The House of Belur's support would be invaluable, he said, his voice carrying a quiet authority. But it's not just about what we offer. It's about what we all stand to lose if we continue on this path of destruction. Lady Vastra stood, her movements deliberate, the silence in the room thickening. She walked toward them, her heels clicking softly on the stone floor. I have my doubts, she admitted, her voice low. But I will consider your proposal. Know this, human, the future of Zelaria is not a gift, it's a price. And if you want to change the future, you will need to pay it. Lila nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. This wasn't just diplomacy, it was war in a different form. The stakes had never been higher. As they left the House of Belur's estate, Lila couldn't help but feel the weight of what lay ahead. But there was also a sense of purpose now, a belief that they could actually make this work. Together, they could bridge the divide between two species and perhaps even change the course of history. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, it felt possible. And that hope, that flicker of light, was worth the fight. The journey back to their temporary quarters was a quiet one, with both Lila and Therax lost in their own thoughts. The weight of the meeting with Lady Vastra pressed heavily on Lila's shoulders. She knew the risks they had just taken, laying their cards on the table in front of the most influential and dangerous figure in Zelaria. But she also knew it was the only chance they had. It wasn't just about survival now, it was about a future they could build together, a future that seemed so far away, yet for the first time felt within their grasp. The walk through the city of Zelaria was different this time. The streets, which had once felt alien and cold, now seemed to pulse with possibility. It wasn't just the city that had changed, it was Lila herself. Something had shifted within her. Her resolve had solidified, and there was no turning back now. As they arrived at their quarters, Lila turned to Therax, her voice breaking the silence. "Do you think she'll support us?" Therax's response was measured, his eyes narrowing in thought. "Lady Vastra is a pragmatic leader. She'll weigh her options carefully. But if our offer is real, if we can deliver on our promises, then I believe she will come around." Lila nodded but remained silent. The path they were on was fraught with dangers, and she knew better than anyone that the road to peace was never smooth. But there was no other choice. They had to push forward, no matter what. The days that followed were a blur of activity, as Lila and Therax continued their efforts to garner support for their vision of unity. They met with diplomats, scientists, and leaders from various factions, each encounter more fraught with tension than the last. The odds were still stacked against them. But as time wore on, the flicker of hope that had started to grow within her grew brighter. Then, one night, as Lila sat alone in their quarters, a message arrived. It was from Lady Vastra. The message was short, but its implications were immediate. "Meet me at the Helios Observatory at dawn. I've made my decision." Lila's heart raced. This could be it. The turning point they had been waiting for. But she knew better than to get her hopes up too high. There was still so much at stake. Lady Vastra was a formidable opponent, and nothing was certain until they had her full support. The next morning, Lila and Therax made their way to the Helios Observatory, a stunning structure that reached high above the clouds, its glass dome glimmering in the first light of day. As they arrived, Lila could feel the tension mounting in the air, the anticipation almost palpable. The observatory was quiet, save for the gentle hum of the energy grids that powered the complex. Lady Vastra stood waiting for them, her regal presence as imposing as ever. She looked out over the city below, her arms crossed as she surveyed the world she had spent her life trying to control. "I see you've come," Lady Vastra said, her voice as cold and commanding as ever. "I've thought long and hard about your proposal. And while I remain skeptical, I have come to a decision." Lila's breath caught in her throat. "And?" Lady Vastra turned to face them, her gaze piercing. "I believe that, perhaps, your bond isn't a mere fantasy. But I need more than words. If you wish for me to stand by you, I need you to prove your commitment. I want to see you both tested." Lila's pulse quickened. "Tested? How?" Lady Vastra smiled, though it was not a comforting smile. "There are trials, old tests, that the House of Balor has always used to determine loyalty. You must pass them, if you want my support. Prove to me that this alliance is not some fleeting dream, but a true partnership." Lila exchanged a glance with Therax. Neither of them spoke for a moment, each weighing the gravity of Lady Vastra's challenge. But Lila knew there was no backing out now. If they were to change the course of history, they would have to face whatever trials awaited them. "We're ready," Lila said, her voice steady. "We'll do whatever it takes." The trials Lady Vastra spoke of were brutal, designed to test not only their physical and mental strength, but also the depth of their connection. The first test was one of survival, an obstacle course set in the heart of a dangerous wilderness, filled with treacherous terrain, deadly creatures, and harsh conditions. The second test was one of trust, a challenge where they would have to rely on each other's strengths to overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. The two of them made their way through the wilderness, side by side, facing challenges that forced them to lean on one another in ways they never had before. Lila found herself depending on Therax in ways that felt both unfamiliar and comforting. His strength, his intuition, and his unwavering support were exactly what she needed in those moments of doubt. And in return, she offered him her own resilience, her determination to see this through to the end. There were moments of fear when they nearly fell into an abyss, when they narrowly avoided being attacked by a group of hostile creatures, but through it all, their bond grew stronger. Every trial they faced, every challenge they overcame, brought them closer to one another. And as the days wore on, Lila realized something that she had been trying to ignore for so long: she was falling in love with him. The realization hit her like a thunderclap, sharp, sudden, and undeniable. She had known that their relationship was complicated from the start. They came from two completely different worlds, two completely different species. But as they fought side by side, as they shared these intimate moments of struggle, she couldn't deny the feelings that had begun to stir inside her. But would he feel the same? Could they truly have a future together, despite the differences between their worlds? Or was this just another fleeting moment, doomed to end the moment their mission was over? These questions haunted her as they faced the final trial, a test of loyalty. They were each given a task that required them to make a choice between their mission and their personal desires. Lila's task was the most difficult. She had to choose between saving Therax, who had been gravely injured, or completing the mission to secure Lady Vastra's support. The choice was clear. Lila chose Therax, without hesitation. She pulled him into her arms, using every ounce of strength to carry him to safety, knowing that the mission could fail without Lady Vastra's support. But in that moment, she realized something that would change everything: she would never sacrifice him, no matter what. Therax, though weakened, managed to look at her with admiration in his eyes. "I knew you would choose me," he whispered, his voice hoarse. Lila smiled through the exhaustion, her heart swelling with something more than just relief. It was love. And it was real. The trials had tested them in every possible way, but they had emerged stronger. Together. Lady Vastra met them at the end of the trials, her eyes scanning them both with a mixture of approval and skepticism. "You have passed," she said, her voice cold but not unkind. "But you have much to prove still. The road ahead is not an easy one. You are not the only ones vying for control of this empire." "We understand," Lila said, her voice steady, though her heart pounded with anticipation. "But we're ready to face whatever comes next." Lady Vastra studied her for a long moment before nodding. "Then let the true test begin." The weeks that followed their trials were a whirlwind of political intrigue, dangerous alliances, and covert missions. Lady Vastra's support, while invaluable, had come at a steep price. Lila and Therax were now embroiled in the fiercest political struggle the Zelaria Empire had ever seen. The tension was palpable, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. Lady Vastra had kept her word. She had pledged her support to their cause, but she also made it clear that her loyalty came with strings attached. She demanded that Lila and Therax play the political game with the same cunning and ruthlessness as those who had opposed them. No longer were they simply two people in love, fighting for survival. They were now leaders in a war for the future of Zelaria itself. It was in these moments, as they navigated the treacherous world of court politics, that Lila began to realize just how much had changed. The mission that had once felt so simple, fighting for peace, for unity, had become an all-encompassing battle for control, not just of the Empire, but of the very forces that shaped it. Every conversation, every negotiation, felt like a battle in and of itself, one where there were no clear winners, only survivors. One evening, as the light from the twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with vibrant shades of purple and gold, Lila and Therax found themselves alone in a private chamber within Lady Vastra's estate. The air was heavy with the weight of their responsibilities, the world outside buzzing with political maneuvering, but inside, it was just the two of them. Lila, her eyes tired but filled with resolve, looked at Therax. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can keep up with all of this. It feels like we're becoming something we didn't intend." Therax's gaze softened as he approached her, his fingers lightly brushing the strands of hair that had fallen in front of her face. "I think the right thing is the one we choose," he replied. "No one else can make that decision for us. We've come this far, and the road ahead is full of uncertainty. But as long as we walk it together, I believe we can shape it into something meaningful." His words were a balm to her soul, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Lila allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could carve out a future for themselves in this chaotic world. The next day, they were summoned to the Great Hall of the High Council. The atmosphere was thick with tension as factions vied for influence, and whispers of betrayal filled the air. They were not yet powerful enough to demand allegiance from the entire council, but with Lady Vastra's backing, they had gained a foothold. It was time for them to make their move. Lila and Therax arrived at the council chamber, their hearts pounding in unison. The room was grand, its high ceilings supported by crystalline columns that pulsed with a faint bioluminescent glow. The seats around the circular table were occupied by some of the most powerful individuals in the Empire, each one with their own agenda, their own thirst for control. As they entered, all eyes turned toward them. The silence was deafening, the weight of their presence felt by every person in the room. Lila stepped forward, her voice steady but filled with authority. "We stand here today, not as enemies or allies, but as a force of change. We are not asking for power, we are asking for the opportunity to build something better, something that will unite our worlds instead of dividing them." The words echoed in the chamber, the tension palpable as the council members exchanged wary glances. Lila could feel the eyes of the room on her, the skepticism thick in the air. She knew that her words alone wouldn't be enough to convince them. It was time to show them just how much they were willing to sacrifice for the future they envisioned. We have faced trials. We've seen the worst of each other, and we've learned from it, she continued. But we've also found something that can bridge the divide between us, a shared understanding that transcends our differences. This is not just about politics, or power. This is about survival. About the future of our species. Dirac stepped forward beside her, his presence adding weight to her words. We ask you to take a chance, to break free from the old ways of thinking. The path to unity is not an easy one, but it is the only one that can secure a future for our people. There was a long pause, as the council members absorbed the gravity of their words. Finally, the High Chancellor, a tall and imposing figure with darkened violet skin, spoke. Your words are bold, but words mean little in this room. What proof do you have that this alliance will succeed? That you are more than just a fleeting fantasy? Lila's heart skipped a beat, but she held her ground. Proof comes with action, she said. We have already shown our commitment to each other. Our trials have proven that we are willing to sacrifice everything for this cause. But we need you to make the same choice to join us and build a new future, or to remain shackled by the past. The silence in the room stretched, thick and heavy. It was clear that their words had struck a nerve. One by one, the council members began to speak, each offering their own views, each weighing the pros and cons of supporting them. But the decision was not simple. The Empire was on the brink of change, and no one wanted to be the first to step into the unknown. It was Lady Vastra who broke the silence. I've watched you both, she said, her voice cool and calculating. And I believe in your vision. The time for hesitation is over. We move forward, or we perish. Her words were like a spark to dry tinder. One by one, the council members began to nod in agreement, their resistance slowly fading as they saw the possibility of a united future unfold before them. The following weeks were a blur of negotiations, alliances, and delicate maneuvering. Lila and Therax found themselves at the center of a political maelstrom, but for the first time, they were not just surviving, they were building something real. Their relationship, forged in the crucible of adversity, had become the foundation of a new era. But despite the growing support they garnered, there were still those who resisted. Factions within the council, the military, and even some of the most influential families of Zelaria saw the changes they were advocating for as a threat to the old order. These enemies were more insidious than any battlefield adversary they had faced before, working in the shadows to undermine their progress. As the political landscape shifted, Lila and Therax found themselves once again in a fight for survival, not just for themselves, but for the future of their worlds. The stakes had never been higher, and yet, they knew they had no choice but to press forward. For in the end, their love was the only thing that could unite the fractured empire. And as they stood together on the precipice of change, they realized that their greatest challenge was not the battles they had already fought, but the ones that lay ahead. But no matter what came their way, they would face it together, with the strength of their bond as their guiding force. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Lila and Therax felt that maybe, just maybe, the impossible could become reality. The next few months were nothing short of a whirlwind for Lila and Therax. With the political landscape of the Zelaria Empire in flux, their relationship and their vision for unity were put to the test. Every decision they made was a gamble, one that could either secure their place in history or see them torn apart by those who feared change. It was a time of intense transformation. Zelaria's once rigid social and political systems were being challenged in ways they had never been before. Long-standing traditions were questioned, and new alliances were forged under the most unlikely circumstances. Yet, for every step forward, there were two steps backward, as the Empire's powerful factions fought tooth and nail to maintain their dominance. One evening, as Lila sat in the vast balcony of their private chambers, looking out over the Zelaria skyline, the glow of the city stretching beneath her, she couldn't help but wonder if the future they had dreamed of was still within reach. The sky was a brilliant canvas of colors, with the three moons of Zelaria casting soft silver light over the crystalline towers and glowing landscapes. Darax entered the room silently, his usual presence a comforting weight. He stood beside her, his gaze fixed on the horizon as he leaned against the railing. "Do you ever think about what happens if we fail?" he asked, his voice low and thoughtful. Lila glanced at him, the question weighing heavily in her mind as well. The fear of failure had always lurked in the background, but in the face of all they had endured together, it had become almost tangible. "All the time," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I also think about what happens if we succeed. If we can make it work, we won't just change Zelaria, we'll change the universe." The uncertainty between them was palpable, yet there was an underlying strength in their shared conviction. Lila reached for Darax's hand, her fingers brushing his as they intertwined. "We've come too far to turn back now," she said, her voice firm with a determination that mirrored his own. Darax nodded, his dark eyes meeting hers. "We fight for the future, not just for us, but for everyone." The days that followed were filled with intense political maneuvers and clandestine meetings. While the majority of the council had begun to rally behind their cause, a few key factions remained staunch in their opposition. These powerful enemies were not just content with undermining Lila and Darax's influence, they sought to crush it entirely, even if it meant risking the collapse of the Empire. But Lila was no stranger to this kind of battle. As a diplomat, she had learned to read between the lines, to detect the subtle shifts in tone and the barely concealed threats that lingered in every conversation. Darax, though a warrior, had proven himself to be just as shrewd, leveraging his knowledge of strategy and tactics to navigate the complex web of alliances and betrayals. One of the greatest threats they faced came from the Dominion's most powerful faction, the House of Selek. Led by the cunning Lord Elgar, the House of Selek was the dominant military power in the Empire, with a network of spies, assassins, and loyal soldiers under its command. It was the perfect foil to Lila and Darax's growing movement FO.